Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined today by a very special guest indeed, someone who is gracious enough to be here to work behind the scenes to help make this happen, in fact, and I really appreciate it. Neil Druckmann. He needs no other introduction. Neil, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Colin Moriarty, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. It's good to be here with you. It's good to talk to you. I feel like we haven't talked on the record in years.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has. I think maybe kind of funny, maybe even IGN. I don't know. But I appreciate you. This is kind of inside baseball, but people like it. Is like I appreciate you working to make this happen, and for you to be here. And it's been awesome to kind of reconnect with Sony PR as well and try to get this going. And it's been a process, and I am thankful and grateful for everyone involved to make it happen. So I'm sure the audience is thrilled to see this episode pop up. So
yeah,
thanks again.
These days time is so precious. It's getting harder and harder to kind of book these things. So big thanks to a lot of people that worked behind the scenes to make this happen.
Yeah, definitely. So how's life, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's I'm very busy. I try to find a good balance between being so extremely busy and trying to get a bit more focused these days, and just spending a lot of time with family. I've been really enjoying that. So, playing Split Fiction with my son. We just finished that. That was awesome. I loved it. And then last night I got to watch the episode I directed with my kids, which was also really cool for them to see what I've done. And they got to visit me on set. So they were like, oh my God, I remember this set and I remember this part.
Yeah, that must be so awesome. And gratifying. And for people in your life, I mean, you've been so famous in games for so long, but it must be extra gratifying, or at least it would be gratifying for me, for people in my life to see like, oh, I have an HBO show. Like, you don't have to have this bespoke console or be a gamer or anything to understand. Now I have this hit TV show to show off.
It is interesting that a different part of my family now knows what I do, and I could actually talk about the story of part one and part two, even with my parents and other members of like friends and family that normally just don't play video games.
So what's been it's funny because we've talked quite a bit, but about your experience off the record or whatever, or on our own. But I'm curious for you to tell people a little bit about how the process has been and how it's gone from going from video games to TV and back to video games, and like what's been the process.
That is a very broad question. So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
I'll ramble for a bit, and then we can focus on whatever you'd like. We've been trying to very adapt our games since Uncharted 1. And there have been many false starts, and we got kind of disillusioned about the whole thing for a while. And then, the Uncharted movie came out, and that was very successful. And but more so, The Last of Us has been this really intimate process where we were heavily involved. And it started with me meeting Craig Mazin, who just did Chernobyl, which I absolutely loved. For my money, it was one of the best shows ever made.
It was awesome.
And the fact that the guy that was responsible for that was so into The Last of Us and loved it so intimately. It's the first time we've partnered up with someone that just got it so fundamentally. And then to be inside HBO, when I look back on it now, it feels very similar to PlayStation, in that PlayStation just gives us a lot of freedom, a lot of resources, and a lot of creative freedom to do what we want to do, to stick to our vision. Even when it seems from the outside very controversial, they've always been very supportive of, wanting to end Nathan Drake's story in Uncharted 4. Go for it. We support you. Let's make the best version of that. Or you want to do this very different story for Last of Us 2? Go for it. We support you. Even when we wanted to do Last of Us, right? At the moment, that seemed controversial. Like, oh, we're going to leave Uncharted that at the height of its success and do this brand new IP. A lot of other publishers would have said, hell no, you stick to Uncharted until Uncharted stops making us money. But they understand in the way that we do internally, which is we do our best work when we're really excited by it, when we're really passionate about it. And HBO has been very similar to that, which is, as soon as we started, one of the first things Casey Bloys, who's the head of HBO, said to me and Craig, which was, do as much action as you need to and no more, and do as much violence as you need to and no more. Here we sell drama. And that was such a sigh of relief for me, because previous iterations of this adaptation, I've gotten the opposite note, which is like, make it bigger, make it more like World War Z, which I've always told people, then you should just go make World War Z. Like, why make The Last of Us? The Last of Us is not that. So it's been a really kind of cool process. One, just learning a ton. I think I learned in 1 month more about filmmaking than maybe one would have learned in 4 years in film school. Just there's something about being on set with, again, these are people that HBO brings in and Craig Mazin has brought in. It's like, these are the best of the best people in TV. You're talking about the best costume designers, the best prosthetic people, the best VFX people, so on and so forth, even the talent we have with our actors. And to see them approach the source material with such reverence and artistry, and even changes, but see how beautifully they brought it to life, and to be a part of that, and to make sure Naughty Dog is involved, has just felt really special. So where I am right, and I know I'm skipping a lot, but where we are right now is I'm finally at the tail end of all my responsibilities for season 2. There's just like some interviews like this one and stuff that talk about the show and whatnot. But for the most part, season 2 is finished. And we just started the writer's room for season 3, where we will figure out exactly the structure of that season and whether we will have a 4th season or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys if it seems like things are kind of, and by the way, I should note here, although I think people assume we're going to probably spoil The Last of Us / The Last of Us Part 2 / The Last of Us on HBO at some point. So just be, note that. I talked to you a little bit behind the scenes about how my brother and I recently played through the game, and he had somehow avoided all of the spoilers. It was amazing. He was shocked and awed. And
has he lived in a cave? Like,
yeah,
how does one do that?
What's funny is he's an animator. So like, he's totally nerd culture land, and he somehow missed it. So I was so jealous of him. And so I just want to make sure to warn people, if you're some of the people that have avoided it and want to see it for yourself. Yeah, I was going to ask what your plan was, because it seems like things are kind of shaping up to be more Abby centric, I guess, in this 3rd season. Is that an accurate portrayal of the idea?
Well, I guess I could speak more openly than some of my other interviews in that the game. And so much of the game is Abby-centric. And clearly this season has not been Abby-centric. It's been very Ellie-centric. So if we're going to tell the rest of that story, yes, there's a lot of Abby to go around.
Cool. And by the way, I really like the casting of, it's Caitlin Devers, right? Is that her name?
Caitlin Dever.
Dever. And I know her from she did that show with Tim Allen, Last Man Standing, I think, right? She was on that show, right? So I knew her from that. And I think that show is really funny. But I like that.
And know her as Cassie Drake from Uncharted 4.
Of course. And it's funny to see her. And people were really critical of that casting. And I actually, when I saw the pictures and stuff, I'm like, I dig it. I like her. And so I'm excited to see more of her. Let me ask you this, because I wanted to ask you about some of the changes that you made. And this seems to be one of the controversial things about this season, even to me a little bit, not changes were made, but why the changes were made, or like what the impetus was. So let me ask you a little bit about that, and we'll probe it. How do you frame, so when you're approaching the show, is this a way for you to kind of retcon or revise things that you wish you did differently? Or is it basically just trying to make something that will be more be able to be absorbed by a 7 or 8 hour HBO audience for this season, as opposed to spending 30 hours with the game, which is what we got?
Yeah, it's very rare for me to want to fix something, because I believe art is kind of like a statement of its time. It's a combination of ideas we had and that we wanted to tell, who was part of that creative team, and where we were at that moment in our lives. So the conversation usually starts with, what is the story about? What ultimately are we trying to say here? To me, that Venn diagram should be almost 100% overlapping each other as far as the destinations. That's the most important part for me. How we get there, I've learned over other versions of trying to adapt stuff, is like you must be flexible. You must be flexible because the medium is so different. There's something about playing a game that's very, very different from watching a game. You could actually have very little movement in the story and stay completely engaged with an interactive experience, versus story in this other medium is everything. Like, you constantly have to have conflict and movement or it becomes stagnant and boring because you don't have this interactive element. So, for example, in season 2, one of the things we talked very early on about is in the game, Ellie and Dina's relationship is pretty static for a long period of time because they get together before Joel's death. Spoiler alert: Joel dies. They get together before his death, and therefore it's really about them kind of exploring where they are in that moment with their relationship. And only much later, once they arrive in the theater, does the relationship move forward. And we felt in our conversations that we would struggle to tell the story the same exact way in the show because we needed that movement. So therefore, we just looked at the relationship. Like, where do we want to go? What is the destination? And is there a different way to get there? And I'm always open to that. And therefore, we said, okay, let's spend time seeing that relationship blossom and develop over several episodes instead of it would have been all happening, I guess, in episode 2 if we had stuck to the same exact structure as the game. And for the show, that felt better. Even though for the game, again, I wanted it to be static, and I wanted even moments where like Ellie's by herself a lot because I wanted for that feeling of lonesome and you surviving by yourself. And while we could have sequences like that in the show, I don't think we could have sustained multiple episodes like that, like a Revenant style kind of filmmaking for multiple episodes with Ellie. So inherently there's some changes there. And I think it's also important to note when you bring in a collaborator, someone like Craig Mazin or Pedro or Bella or all these really talented artists, you have to leave some part of your mind open to them reinterpreting a material and doing stuff that they're excited about. So kind of going back to our previous part, of how HBO and PlayStation trust us. I know, just as it's true here at Naughty Dog, people do their best work when they're really excited about their ideas, when they have some connection to the ideas. So therefore, if an idea is pitched, and for all intents and purposes, I feel it's equal to what happened in the game, but the person that's going to execute it is really excited by it, I'm going to yield. I'm going to just say, okay, let's get that version of this story. That's okay. That's part of the bargain of what we're making here.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I do feel that we noted this because we're reviewing every episode as it goes. And we did this for the last season as well, just kind of discussing our thoughts on it. And one of the things that I think just is missing from just inherently from TV adaptations or film adaptations, same thing with Uncharted, which I really liked as well, was you just don't get the gameplay beats and like the random, chirps and just the things you learn, the collectibles and environmental storytelling. And you just don't get any of that time. So yeah, I've always been really interested in how you compact that. Because that's what's so heavy about The Last of Us to me is actually, the gameplay and the encounters and all of that, but just being there, exploring, looking around.
Yeah, there are these trade-offs in that, the I forget the exact minute count, but it's roughly, I think, in my mind, 3 hours of cinematics for Last of Us Part 2. The show obviously is, what are we, 7 episodes, roughly an hour each, so that's 7 hours. So that's significantly more time, with cinematic storytelling. But you're right that in the game you have additional like dozens of hours potentially of in-game dialogue where there's just like you get to live with these characters and it's just a different way to connect with them. And again, if you were to lift them exactly as is and try to put them in the show, it wouldn't make for very compelling TV. But there's something really beautiful about experiencing it that way in the game.
We're so focused in our space about people that play the game and then watch the TV show and then they absorb it from there. Tell me a little bit about the inverse experience, what you're hearing. Are people picking up the game for the first time? Are people becoming gamers because of The Last of Us? Are they buying a PlayStation? I'm curious how this is working in reverse because this is probably part of the secret sauce of why these projects are really important. Same thing with Uncharted, probably to a lesser degree. You send people to the game, you make fans out of them. Are you finding that this is happening?
Yes. And that was always my fantasy in wanting to do these adaptations. Because like, me, my first love is video games. I grew up playing video games from as far back as I could form memories. And I had this idea of like, oh man, if we do a really good job, I just believed in the story so much, maybe because of my arrogance, that I felt that if we were to do a great job, and there could be someone that watches this show and is flabbergasted that this is based on the video game just because of their understanding of video games and what video games are or aren't. And then they would pick up the game and it would be a gateway for them for this whole other medium. And that has actually happened. I've had multiple people comes up to me and then and tell me I picked up a PlayStation with The Last of Us. And then after that, I played God of War and then I played Ghost of Tsushima and so on and so forth. And it actually worked in becoming a sort of ambassador for video games in the way that now Fallout has done the same.
Mm-hmm.
Arcane, I think, has done the same. Even Sonic the Hedgehog, I think, has done something similar where, like, I saw it with my kids wanting to play the games after watching the movies. So that, for me, is the reason, besides making an amazing TV show, is wanting to do it justice and making sure there is consistency with the game. Not making it identical, but consistency, that you get similar feelings watching it as you would playing it, or at least as close as we can with the difference in medium. And then I have, like, obviously there's the business part of what I do, which is I get data, and there's a pretty significant lift in sales for the games when the show airs. And even as it was about to air, we saw that change.
That's awesome. I mean, this is kind of a similar thing, but since we're talking about the differences between film and TV shows and then games and the way these fuse together, what's it been like for you to talk to so many journalists and media people and do interviews like this, like you were saying, because you can talk about the game much more deeply because we understand the game aspect of it. How do you portray the information to people that maybe aren't in the space, don't understand the space, or maybe don't even take it very seriously?
I mean, first of all, it's interesting how many people are gamers now, because most of the interviews I do with journalists, they have played the game. And they lead with that, and they start gushing about the game, and then they talk about the show and they ask questions about the show. But every once in a while, you get someone that will tell me, "I'm so sorry, I haven't played the game." And I'm like, "That's okay. It was made for people like you." I think 2/3 of our audience has not played the game that watch the show. So most people that watch the show have not played the game. And then I just talk about the story the way I would just talk about the story. I talk about its themes. I talk about relationships. I talk about the characters. It's sometimes hard for me to not keep saying, we did this in the game and now we're doing this in the show. This came from the game. I try to just remove all that and just talk about as if we're writing the game and the show for the first time. And I just kind of approach the initial inspiration or initial creative choices that, for game 2, it was me and Hallie mostly doing, along with many other people at Naughty Dog.
Since you brought up Sonic, and obviously, there are examples like Mario, things are just becoming Fallout, things are becoming much stronger in the game space. Obviously, PlayStation Productions, I haven't seen Until Dawn yet, actually, but I really liked Uncharted. I liked Gran Turismo. I think Twisted Metal is good. What is it? What's different now? When I was a kid, and you were a kid, we had that original Mario movie that was terrible. We had all of these kind of false starts and things like that scared Nintendo away from movies for like 30 years, like, which is hysterical when you really think about it. Or 25 years or whatever. What's changed? Is it what you're saying, that people are more integrated into games? They understand them more now. They're not trying to just wring them dry. When you see a film like the early 90s Mario movie, you wonder what they were even doing, really. It's interesting. It's an artifact of a different era of looking at game movies and game TV shows and adaptations. What has changed?
Yeah, I have my theories, so I don't quite know for sure. But I remember when we were working on the demo for Last of Us 1. And we had this production company that was very interested in it and came by our studio, and we showed them the demo, and I talked a little about the arcs of the characters and what the story's about. And the guy asked me a few questions about, like, relationship with Tommy or something, and I gave some answer that I think he wasn't happy with. He's like, okay, great. He was very dismissive, and he was like, yeah, you guys are great with the gameplay and the set pieces and stuff. That's fine. But, we're the story people. We would figure all that stuff out. We would solve it. And I remember in the back of my mind, I thought, we will never work with this guy on The Last of Us.
Interesting.
And I think what has changed is that guy was not a gamer and just kind of looked down at games to say it's this lesser than thing. It's obviously very popular, and we should leverage the popularity to market this other thing, but we will solve all the problems that you guys clearly don't care about. And I think it was just a fundamental misunderstanding of the games we were making, and I think just what games are capable of. And it's not, I think the average of the storytelling in games has definitely gotten better. But I think great storytelling has always existed in games. Some of my favorite stories go back to my childhood of playing video games with The Secret of Monkey Island. It's like still, to this day, one of my favorite stories of all time. So I think a large part of what happened is the older generation has retired or died off, and a new generation of executives across the board has come in that play video games and understand them and love them. and or are sitting next to people that at least understand what they're capable of and are respecting it more than they ever have, and therefore are taking this craft a lot more seriously and understanding when you get this adaptation correct, and correct can mean different things based on your source material, that it comes with huge success.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you're saying, it was a little more craven probably back in the day. People wanting to, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money and do all that and the fusion, the synthesis of everything. But yeah, it seems much more.
I like Bob Hoskins. I love Super Mario Brothers, right? One of my favorite games of all time. That's not a huge leap to say, but that movie just got it fundamentally wrong, right? It's like that's not Bowser. There's no reality that's ever Bowser, but I think it was Dennis Hopper. I think.
Dennis Hopper. Yeah. I think. Yeah. It was. God, I still remember the movie poster in like my local video store. I was like, what? Even as a 10-year-old, whatever, I was like, what is this? Like what?
Well, I remember for myself as well. Even as a child, I'm like, I knew that was wrong. It didn't capture it, and it's like I saw it one time and I never saw it again.
Right, and then you see things like Netflix's Castlevania, especially that first season, and you're like, man, people really do get it. And then you see something like The Last of Us, or you see something like Fallout, and so on, and so you feel that way too. Let's talk a little bit about the second season then. What has been your response to the response for the second season? It seems like things from the gamer's perspective are a little more divisive this season than the last time. But like you said, 2/3 of your audience are unaware of the games and didn't play them. So they're fresh and they're probably, actually, I know at least anecdotally, they're loving it. My sister's watching it with her husband. They're loving it. They don't play. My dad loves it, 74-year-old man. And others. So they're into it. And I liked it a lot too, though I have questions and some criticisms, but it seems like things are a little more divisive this time around. Is that your read of it as well?
It's hard for me to know. It's definitely, I think it's a safe assumption. I've seen enough of it to know that, that some people struggle with some of the changes we made. I think this season more so than the first season. But first of all, the first thought I have these days is, one, just an understanding that you're going to get that. Meaning, once you make something that is going to be viewed by millions of people worldwide, you're going to get every reaction under the sun. And then this story in particular, you were there. You played the game. When it came out, it was also divisive. And so then adapting it, this was a much harder adaptation, just because I think the story was structured more so for the interactive medium than even the first game. So we knew we had to make maybe grander changes, like the one I just discussed with Ellie and Dina's relationship, that I could see why people struggle with it. But I just come back to this place of appreciation, which is, first of all, how cool is it that people can talk about this adaptation and can say, I like this part better in the game, or I like this part better in the show, and that the game can stand shoulder to shoulder with an HBO show? Like, that to me is incredible. It's like we are helping elevate, I think, the medium and how it's looked upon. And the fact that, someone could read a criticism like that and say, maybe I should check out the game so I could compare it. I think that's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I think sometimes people are a little maybe too quick to jump the gun because they know the whole story. So they will see certain thing or they expect a beat to be there, and then it's not there, and they just assume it's never going to show up. And they're like, and I see them, they get very kind of frustrated because they love that beat. And I just have to say in my mind, just be patient. Just be patient. We're going to get there. Again, the destinations are the thing that are most important to me. And then I also have to accept that some people are just not going to like what we do. Again, millions of people are engaging with it. It's okay if it doesn't work for you. It does work for many other people. And what's important for me, I guess, or the thing I'm always hopeful for is that, let me back up for a second. Mm-hmm. There's something that I love about what we do, which is there's no guarantee of success. That's kind of what makes it a bit of a high wire act. It's like you do your best, you have a vision for a thing, and then you execute it, and then you kind of have to put it into the world, and whatever the reaction is the reaction. You cannot predict. If someone could predict what success looks like, they would do it 100% of the time. You just can't. So what's important to me, though, is that there is enough of a business success, a financial success for the people that fund what we do so that they let us do it again. And on that aspect, it's been a resounding success because HBO renewed us for a season 3 before the season even aired. Which gave me a big sigh of relief because, again, no matter what happens now, it's like HBO is happy, we get to finish the story. That's what's important to us.
How did you? I remember asking you this during one of our conversations, and we talked about it, but it's so interesting to me about Joel's death. I remember asking you a while ago, are you guys going to lean into it? It seems like one of those things that I think I remember bringing up to you a similar HBO show based on a book, of course, the Game of Thrones, the cataclysmic death at the end of the first season that no one could believe, like based on just the mores of television. He'll get out of it. That someone will come save the day. And Joel's death to me is a similar thing where you couldn't believe it. Now, I didn't get to play the game without having it spoiled for me, so I knew it was going to happen. Did you guys know you wanted to lean into it kind of sequentially where it was in the game, which is so early? Because I feel like that would have been so surprising to the audience. And yet the HBO audience is somewhat geared towards these unusual events. And so maybe it's the perfect place for it.
Yeah, I guess first thing I'll say is the reaction seems to be calmer than the reaction to the video game. Now, granted, the video game had a lot of weird circumstances around how that was revealed. The way Craig and I work is we interrogate everything. If there's like an idea that just pops in our head, even if it seems dumb or crazy, we will explore it. So I know at some point we explored delaying it, and then we talked about, okay, what would happen between the beginning of the show and then this event. And it just felt like this show would be meandering. And the simple reason is that's your inciting incident. The story begins when Joel dies. Everything else is like a prologue to that moment. Everything is set into motion once he's killed. So you could delay it, but to what end? And it felt like, oh, you would do it as maybe like a business decision, a commercial decision, but not an artistic one. And the artistic one for me will almost always win. And in this instance, it just made a lot of sense for both of us to do it very early because it is the start. Although, funnily enough, I was recently talking to Casey Bloys, who's the head of HBO, and he was telling me, "Hey, Neil, I just got off this phone with this agent who was yelling at me. He's like, I can't believe you didn't offer those guys $10 million to just keep Pedro around for like another season." And he said, you make a deal to adapt this game and you got to stick to the source material. That's the deal, which was just a good reminder for me of like, oh, this was the right choice to end up with HBO. They understand it, they get it, they respect it. And it's, I think a lesser studio, or again, someone that would prioritize maybe business over art, would have tried to pressure us to make a different decision.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really appreciated that too, and seeing it and leaning kind of into the way the game runs. Because like you said, it's all about that. It's all about that moment. What about, so one of the things I love about this adaptation specifically, but just worlds that I really love, like a BioShock or whatever. And what I love about The Last of Us is the 99.9% of it that we don't know. And that happened in quotes, might be in the Bible for the story and all of the rest, but we don't see it. And one of the things that I really loved actually was the scene with the Fireflies in Salt Lake City, when it kind of introduces what happened there to the audience, and like that they're aware of it, that there's this character Abby and all of the rest, because you could see that happened, like maybe happened and we just didn't get to see it. How did you play around with, for the TV adaptation, exposing Abby and kind of who she is and what her motivations are? It's much quicker in the show. And I was wondering if you guys felt the need to do that for the TV audience. You didn't want them to have this lingering question. Like, we really have no answers about Abby for a long time in the game. Why did you guys put a finer point on it in the television show? Did you feel like that was really important to the storytelling, or was there an idea that maybe we keep her really vague and even almost non-existent in this season, except for when she kills Joel and have people guessing? But maybe that doesn't work for TV.
Yeah, this is the first time where we had to really consider that we cannot tell the full story in this one season. So therefore, there's certain things that you're going to do and certain things you're going to hang on to, like keep in your back pocket for when we hopefully go forward and continue telling the story. So it felt like certain bits of information would have been too long to wait potentially multiple years to reveal. That in the game, as a counterpoint, when you're playing as Abby, you're already connecting to her because you're surviving as her. So you have this thrill, this adrenaline rush, this that you just isn't quite the same in the show. So we felt it was important to give people more of her motivation, because that is more of the fuel for a TV show than it is in the video game, where we can withhold it. And when you buy the game, you decide what you're pacing, right? You want to do 30 hours straight and play it beginning to end? You can't. You want to kind of parse it out like an hour a day or a few hours a week? You can, right? You are in control of that pacing. With the show, we're releasing it week to week. And then we have to take a big hiatus as we write and go to pre-production, and then eventually shoot and do post, and then finally release the next season. So withholding the Abby motivation to where you find it in the game just felt too long. Just like, the last night's episode of the famous porch scene between Joel and Ellie. That's another one that in our conversation felt like, if this happens in season 3 or maybe even season 4, people would have to wait a very long time to get this porch scene. And I just don't know if it will land. Like, I remember watching certain shows like Lost, where they would have payoffs like in season 4 for something that happened in season 1 or 2. And I just wouldn't remember. And I'd be like, it lost its impact on me.
Right.
And because of that, it just felt like, the spoiler part of it, or just the earlier reveal, is less important to me. Just make sure it lands and people understand the story.
We talked a little bit about the casting earlier. How have you felt about the continued kind of feedback about the casting for the different characters, whether it is Abby not being as buff, or Bella Ramsey perhaps for some people looking too young, and so on and so forth? I know you're obviously not going to say, and I'm sure you don't actually feel like, oh, we made a huge mistake, we should have cast this other person. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I wonder like how you deal with that feedback and how you see that feedback. Because I do find myself getting lost enough in the show. It's actually very similar to Uncharted, where you almost couldn't believe Tom Holland, like as Nathan Drake, a great actor, right? But like, and then an hour into the movie, I'm not even thinking about it anymore. And it's actually a very similar situation here, where you can critically look at things, and yet I'm as even a huge fan of the game as I'm still immersed in it and enmeshed in it. So I don't quite see it the way some other people do. But how do you feel about some of the conflict and controversy around the casting?
Yeah. Look, on the one hand, I can kind of understand where people are coming from, because they have such attachment to the source material. I remember when I saw, Nicolas Cage was going to be Superman, and I had like such a negative reaction to that. I'm like, Nicolas Cage can't be Superman. Now in my life, I'm kind of intrigued. I'm like, that would have actually been a really interesting Superman.
There's like some stuff that leaked from that, right? Like him fitting in the suit and stuff. That's interesting. Yeah.
And likewise, you see it across the board of if you focus on other adaptation, or like, my favorite film, Batman, is Michael Keaton. I just thought he was the most interesting. Now, does he physically look like Bruce Wayne from the comic book? Not really. I remember when Heath Ledger was announced for Joker, and people were just mocking it left and right. And they're like, oh, he'll never live up to Jack Nicholson. And I'm glad that he didn't try to duplicate Jack Nicholson's, because we got this other really beautiful thing. And I love Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
Right.
Just like I love Heath Ledger as the Joker. So my approach has always been, this, by its very nature, is going to be different. I already accepted that it needs to be different, but I knew that some people would not accept that, and that's okay. You don't have to. It's. But if I'm going to bring someone like Pedro Pascal, if I'm going to bring someone like Bella Ramsey, who are just incredible artists, then you got to give it room for them to, performance-wise, make it their own, but also aesthetically, does Pedro's beard match CG Joel's beard? No. Does Bella look exactly like Ellie in the game? No. But that's okay.
Right.
What's more important for me is that their soul, who they are on the inside, not how they pronounce certain lines, or not exactly how they move, or even their muscular physicality. Those are things that in the game we could noodle forever, right? The character doesn't need to look like the actor. These days we do more digital doubles, but often we don't, and we can change them drastically. That's just not how casting works with live action. So for me, performance trumps everything. And for my money, for our taste, I feel like we cast with the best options that we had in front of us, and now it's hard for me to imagine for this version anybody else playing those roles.
Yeah, it works for me. Like you, I understand the criticism because I think there are purists out there and have a real attachment to the subject matter. But I think once you get lost in the weeds and you just kind of absorb it, I don't think about it during there's never been a time where I was like, oh, this doesn't work for me because of this particular casting. And it really is about the immersion of the story. I agree.
It is, but it's also interesting that I see, and I don't want to dwell too much on this, but there's just a lot of bad faith stuff out there, which is I see now people take a trailer or a scene from a thing, and they'll just find the worst frame of the person they could get.
Right.
And be like, this is who you cast as this character, and they'll put it next to the best frame from this other version of that character. And it just, there's like a lot of grifting of people just riling people up.
I know.
Anyways, that's not worth a lot of our time.
No, it isn't. I totally agree with you though. It is weird. Like, yeah, it's 24 frames per second. You're taking out one frame of this, 10-minute sequence, and everyone's going to look horrible in the interstitials. I don't know if anyone's ever taken pictures before. I find that stuff annoying too.
I just hope that, when people that are really invested in the story, I hope they eventually look at it in the aggregate, look at the whole thing when it's finished and see, did you buy these characters and their arcs and what they went through? That's what's important to us, that it feels believable, that you buy into them, even if you disagree with them morally, that you buy and understand them.
So let's talk a little bit about your episode. That was episode 6. We're recording this the day after. My wife and I watched it last night. And as the audience knows, we're reviewing every episode as we go. So I have an extensive set of notes here for that particular
By the
conversation.
way, while I was talking to you,
Yeah.
I just declined a call from Pedro Pascal. So just...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. I'll talk to him later. But I'm sure he wants to give me his feedback on on last night's episode.
Fair enough. That's look at you. So big time.
I just want to drop names while I'm talking.
I would too. So one of the things I said to you earlier, Neil, and I'm sure you're a storyteller and a gifted one at that, and I'm sure you feel this way about a lot of the stories you love. And as I said earlier, is I love all the stuff in the seams, the stuff we don't see and we don't know. And one of the things I loved your episode, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass. My wife and I were both saying we think it's the strongest episode of the season so far, in our opinion. And I love that it started with something we never saw. We never even really got a taste of. Texas, 1983, Joel as a kid, hearing about Tommy, but not really seeing him yet. Maybe we see him in a future episode as a child. And Joel and Tommy's dad, cop, hard drinking kind of guy, obviously abusive to his family, but then sets this seed about trying to do better and try to be better. And it ends up being very anticlimactic in the moment until you tie it towards it at the end. I'm curious, I guess what I'm saying is, how do you figure out what you want to say that's not in the game? And are these ideas, like, was this a cutscene that you wanted to do in the original game? Was it something that you came up with later? I guess I'm curious how you come up with these ideas. And this is the stuff I really love, because even if you're critical of where the show is going or what it is or whatever, it's all of these things that fill in the story and give us more life. And I like that a lot. So I'm curious if you can talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that one started with an idea Craig mused about. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to go back in time and see Joel's dad? And maybe see, like, I think his pitch was see them even younger, see them in the playground and see some kid picking on Tommy and Joel just goes and just beats them up. And instead of the dad scolding them, there's a connection there that the dad understands that instinct because he has that same instinct. I love that. Again, I love ideas that are not mine. That is the beauty of this collaboration. What we do is incredibly collaborative, and ideas often can come from crazy places. And then sitting with that idea, it's funny. Then at some point, I think Craig forgot about it, and we're like, when we're writing this scene, I'm like, no, dude, I just, this idea that you had, I can't stop thinking about it because it's so much of our story is about this generational trauma and just not even trauma, just passing on this information, this programming. Joel is, in one sense, he's dead. In the other sense, he lives on through Ellie. What Ellie's learned from him, what she tried to absorb from him. And sometimes she gets it right, and sometimes she gets it terribly wrong. So it just made complete sense to then go in the opposite direction and to say, okay, well, where does Joel get his savior complex? And where did he get his understanding of violence? And we had so many different versions. We had versions where the dad did come home drunk and we saw him beat up the kids. We had the whole sequence of Joel going and seeing Tommy buying the drugs and seeing young Joel be violent. And at the end, we just kept simplifying and distilling it to this one moment that felt like the dad maybe for the first time is really connecting with his son of like, Joel used violence, and often that has gotten him into trouble with his dad, but this time it was different. It was different because it wasn't because someone stepped on your shoes. You fought someone and beat them up to save your tribe, to save your brother. Maybe now you can understand why I've done certain things. Maybe now you can understand sometimes why I've hit you and Tommy. And as much as it hurts me, I've done it to protect you. And that's how parents often feel, that, we do these things that are sometimes hurtful to our kids, but we do them to protect them. So it just felt very appropriate with its themes and everything. And the way we kind of work is I will take a path and I pass it to Hallie. She'll take a path, then we'll pass it to Craig. He'll take a path, and we'll kind of just keep going in circles until it feels right. And then we move on to like the next part of the script.
It's funny, man. My dad wasn't abusive to me at all, but the line, "I hope you do a little better than me," is something that he would say, like, to me. That struck me as like something a dad does say to a son or a daughter in a tender moment. And yeah, I liked that a lot. That was part of part of what I really like about the HBO rendition is just getting to see more. And one of the things,
that is a scene that we could have potentially done in the game, I guess. Although then we would have said, how do we make this playable? And then that would have inherently changed it in some significant way. Or it would just have been a cutscene, and then there would have been just this tension of wanting to get back to gameplay. So yeah, the show affords us these opportunities, especially when we leave the playable character or the main character and focus on someone else. The Bill and Frank episode is maybe the best example of something that would have been very tricky to do in the game, or would have fundamentally changed our creative approach to the game.
God, I love that episode too. That episode was awesome. By the way, shout out to that whole set, the set of the 1983 house. I thought was perfect. I was born in '84, but I was born into that world. But just especially that yellow, that brownish hue, that yellow glass of the ashtray. You just don't see that anymore.
Our art team is insane. There's awesome. a detail that I don't even know if people can notice. It's like the cans, the beer cans were different. They had like a different tab. So they had to make those cans, and I forget how many we had. I want to say 20 or 30, but that's how many takes I could do, because essentially when we ran out of cans, I can't do takes of that part anymore. So I kept like every few takes, I would check in with the props team. How many cans are left? Okay, that's how many takes I have. Okay, so I should probably move to the next setup now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, the old Bud Heavies. Pretty cool. And just the yellow glass of that ashtray just stuck with me because I'm like, oh my God, that brings me back to like my grandma's house or something. That was perfect. One of the things that you guys have introduced a lot more into this season, and I wanted to ask you about, and it's not a character, it's a location, but I feel like it's a character in and of itself in some senses, is Jackson. We don't get to see too much of Jackson in the game. I think this is by virtue of the nature of the game and the journey to Seattle, where it really takes place, and then of course later in Santa Barbara. So we walk through it, we see some parts of it, but we don't really get it like we do now. What has that been like to kind of represent this city that you only hear about? We only hear about it in passing, really. At the end of the game, for instance, we know that I guess Jesse's parents are still living there, and they come visit Ellie and Dina, and it's not too far away, and it's kind of going and buzzing. But you really got a chance to flesh it out. What was that like?
I mean, you're right in that the early conversations were around how do we make Jackson more of a character, that it is this utopia of sorts in this post-apocalyptic world. How does it run? How does it exist? And that's some of my favorite writing that Craig does, is this very kind of almost procedural. I don't even know exactly how to describe it, but the expansion of the city and Joel being part of that. Those were all I thought brilliant Craig ideas. And the other thing I was really intrigued by and wanted to explore is the post-Joel death. Is what is the effect on the city itself? That we got to see hints of it through Ellie, but often it's there's a big constraint in games where every character that you make, you have to model from scratch. So it gets very expensive to add characters. So let's say we wanted to do that town hall scene where they vote whether they should go after Joel or not. That would be an extremely expensive scene to do in a game, unless you made just a bunch of generic people, but then you run the risk that that's going to take you out of that moment. But I really like this idea of that the town would have a vote, that the town would wrestle with this idea of justice especially on the heels of having just been attacked, which in the game we talk about that there are infected attacks, there are raider attacks. We had a whole sequence planned that there would be an attack in one of the flashbacks. It wasn't exactly where it was in the show, but that you would be playing as Ellie alongside Joel of defending a part of Jackson and see how the wall falls. So these are ideas that are kind of in the back of our minds when we approach this. But it allows us to just slow things down a little bit once Joel dies and see more of a reaction to things and then move on from there.
And then, of course, the similar to the making Jackson a character, we kind of have the creation in some sense of a new character in Gale, and the changing of Eugene's character, the kind of fleshing out of Seth's character. What made you want to do all that stuff as well with these particular characters? I believe in the game, you read a letter that Eugene abandoned his family, right, and then dies of natural causes in the library. He's all holed up there, and in this,
that's right. He was a former Firefly that abandoned, left his family to join this cause, and then wrestled with that later in his life, and died of natural causes.
Right. So here you it's totally different. What I mean, not that it really matters. It's a side thing in the game, but what made you want to kind of engage that? And obviously, I think the Gale character is actually great. So it's a really cool touch. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, some of it started in season 1 where Craig had this idea that I really like, that in Boston, the Boston QZ, everybody's trading with different goods, and it seemed appropriate that a therapist could trade, their craft, their trade with for other stuff. And we had written this scene where Joel goes to see a therapist, and he's just wrestling with the idea that his brothers abandoned him and he's left alone and all this stuff. And it didn't quite feel appropriate with what we had for that season. But the idea, I think, just stuck. So then we wanted to revisit that idea going into season 2 and felt like, there's some interesting stuff we could do with this character. How do we tie her back to Jackson, maybe into the lore of the game? And it felt like, Eugene's story is pretty unique in the game. But as it was, it didn't really benefit us for what we wanted to tell here. So then it felt ripe to lift that character out of that, keep some of the stuff that was there. He did deal in weed. He was liked in the town. But then tie him to Gale felt interesting. And it felt the most interesting when we got to episode 6, where you see how Joel killed him. And ultimately everything has to kind of come back to what that says about Joel and Ellie and their relationship. So then once that was there, a lot of stuff fell into place of how do we set that up to make that death as impactful as we can.
My wife has never seen The Sopranos, so when he popped up and it was Joe Pantoliano, right? Is his name. I was like, it's Ralph, and Ralphie. She had no idea. It was awesome to see him, and of course, it's Catherine O'Hara, right? Is the actress's name and she's awesome. She was awesome in Schitt's Creek. Obviously, people know her from.
She is so great. They're both fantastic, and they both made very interesting choices in unexpected ways. That and initially when we cast Joey Pants, we thought the character would have more humor to him, just because of what we've seen him at before, right. And the way he approached that performance, there was so much sadness. And, Joey, in speaking to him, he made this choice where he wanted, the closer he got to death, the more he regressed to being a child. And if you watch him, the way he's begging for Gale, it's almost like a child begging for their mother. They're just terrified. The jokes felt inappropriate. So I just on the day, I just started cutting stuff out and just simplifying the performance more and more. And I felt like it got to this really beautiful place. Likewise with Catherine O'Hara, again, just speaks to just such talented actors. There's a part where she slaps Joel, and she really slapped Pedro. She really went for it. Multiple takes. And then we had this moment where he feels such shame, he walks backwards, and something we needed for the blocking, and it never quite felt right to me. So I was just trying to think of how do we motivate it in a different way? And I pulled Catherine aside, and I'm like, look, I know there's no lines of dialogue here after you slap him, but what if you yelled at him? What if after you find out the truth of what he did to your husband, what if his proximity to the body is almost like desecrating it? So you need him to go away. Whatever you got to do, just get him to go away. And what did I tell her? I said, yell at him. And, she kind of like wrestled with it a little bit. She liked the fact that I had no dialogue. And I promised her, I'm like, look, if we try this and it doesn't work, we'll go back to the no dialogue version. I just always want to just shake things up. Let's just try something a little bit different. So I asked her, yell at him. What she did was so much better. Like when she slaps him. And then what she does, if you watch that scene, she pleads with him. She begs him, please get away from this body. I can't even do it justice. And it was so beautiful. And in that moment, I'm like, so much more brilliant than what I've asked her to do. And that's the brilliance of Catherine O'Hara. Yeah,
she's awesome. And she's really got a wide, I don't know much about acting, but she just seems like she's really in her pocket with a lot of different styles, whether it's comedy or drama or whatever. She's awesome.
She really throws herself at it. There's certain actors that will ask you for a lot of different things. And I even went to her at some point. I said, is there anything you need from another actor? Is there anything you need about the scene that could help you? And she just kind of shrugged and said, you tell me what to do and I'll try to do my best to do it.
Yeah. How much do people like her and Joe Pantoliano and others, like, do they immerse themselves in the game, or do they does each person kind of approach it differently, or are they watching vignettes for her, she's not even in the game. So I guess it's not even. Yeah.
And for you, Eugene, either, I don't know if you would get much out of reading those notes.
Right. Sure.
For that character. So we told everybody, don't play the game. And the reason is because like everything you need to know about your character and what happened to them, their relationship is in the scripts. And I was actually worried that in watching the game, like, Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson are two of the best actors, some of the best acting I've ever worked with. And I didn't want anybody to try to copy that. Because when you copy something, when you Xerox it, it's just going to be a worse version than the original. And it really was important for me and Craig and everybody involved that they own it and make it their own. So often it's just like really digging into the script. And then some actors will just have a bunch of questions of like, okay, what happened before this script? What happened after? Like first call we had with Joey, Craig and I, he just asked a lot of questions about his relationship with Gail and where his mindset and like the psychology of the character. That was really important to him when he was prepping for that scene.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Everyone's different approach to it. It's a world. I mean, it's a world I'm just not familiar with, like I am with games. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the central allegory of The Last of Us Part 2 and its seeming absence in the show so far, which is or at least part of the allegory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and all of this, which I think we see through Dina a little bit in the game. Kind of more literally.
I guess I sorry to interrupt your question,
but
I will say that like I've seen people talk about it this way, and there was never an intent for it to be an allegory. I think there is a misconception of one particular article that's out there. It was meant to be, and I've talked openly about this, there was inspiration from that conflict, but it stopped there at inspiration. Then we took a lot of inspiration for other similar conflicts and then said, okay, how do we construct groups that can talk about different ways of approaching a conflict similar to this? But there is no like, oh, this group is meant to represent this side of this conflict and this group is meant to be, it's like one group is meant to be secular, another group is meant to be religious. But if you look at that conflict on the ground, both sides have aspects of those inside of them. And so a little like there was like, I felt like a bit of cherry picking in order to make that theory work. But that theory, as far as our intent, is false.
Yeah, it's okay. It's interesting. I mean, that defangs the question a little bit, which is good. It reminds me of when we did the spoiler cast 12 or 13 years ago for the original Last of Us, and I told you my theory of the ending, and you're like, that's not true. That's not what happened. I'm like, oh, good.
Well, look, all I could say is, at the end of the day, it's like, however you experience it, if that's what you take away from it, I can't question that. That's what you took away from it. I could just talk about our intent.
Sure, of course.
That has not been our intent. Like our intent, and I remember our conversation was, could the Fireflies make a cure? And our intent was, yes, they could.
Right.
Now, is our science a little shaky that now people are questioning it? Yeah, it was a little shaky, and now people are questioning that. I can't say anything. All I can say is our intent is that they would have made a cure. That makes the most interesting philosophical question for what Joel does.
Sure. It makes it more black and white for storytelling too, which I think is good, because I remember our conversation being like, well, Joel kind of did the right thing because like it probably wasn't going to work anyway. You know? And you're like, well, that wasn't the intent. So no, this is important. And this gets into the conversation of death of the author and all that kind of stuff about intention and the way people read into it. I think when I first played The Last of Us Part 2, I saw it more, I could see what people were looking at as the allegory, but to me, it was just about cyclical violence. on a spectrum of societies, whether you have like a really kind of democratic, kind of laissez-faire Jackson, some more military fascistic wolves, the religious, scars. You even hear about the Ravens. You meet the Rattlers, who are slavers, and all these kinds of things. So I see it that way. But I guess I wanted to ask you. I was hoping in the Seattle section that we were going to have that scene in the synagogue, and I was wondering if maybe because the allegory isn't there, like you're saying, it's not it doesn't read as importantly as I thought it did in the game. But I was wondering if you avoided that to kind of avoid the troubles too that would come along with that kind of imagery.
No, in fact, I talked to Isabella Merced and Craig, and I said it was important for me that Dina is Jewish. I did not want to change that. And, we all kind of accepted it. And then this was even before we were like fully like done writing all the scripts. And for that part of the game, there's a lot that's not in the show. We don't go to the bank where you see like this kind of
the robbers,
heat like robbers that like got turned.
I love that scene though, because that was their first instinct after everything went down was to go there and do that, which is cool.
Exactly. There's so much cool stuff that you get to experience just by living in that world in the game, and we just have to pick and choose the most important moments to move the plot forward. And I obviously felt that synagogue, as much as it hits close to my heart, it wasn't necessary. And it's like everything in the show, every line of dialogue, every shot is so precious. That was the biggest motivating factor. We didn't have, I can't think of a single conversation of like wanting to avoid controversy, especially with this story.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. And that makes a little more sense now that I'm kind of misinterpreting what I read as a central allegory. Although, like you're right, that open-ended section of Seattle does have so much innate storytelling. It could be 2 episodes by itself. And you do see some of it, the music store and so on.
The music store was one that we picked that felt this is kind of important because it goes back to her relationship with Joel and the fact that he did teach her how to play guitar. And the game, there's more stuff coming between Ellie and Dina, and there's still a lot more to learn about these characters.
Yeah, the coolest part of that Seattle part, I think it was in the Seattle part, was the pet store that was like or was it the pet store? It was like a propaganda shop for the wolves, like one of the places.
I think it started as a pet store, and then, if I remember correctly, turned into a propaganda shop where they were like printing flyers.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. But yeah, again, that's hard to portray in a
but it's right. Instead of doing that, which is, it really works for that interactive medium because you find it feels really special. Instead, what we did, we showed, let's show Isaac's backstory. Let's show how he joined the WLF, which is something we couldn't do in the game, because in the game, again, our creative philosophy was never leave the playable characters. So we couldn't do a sequence where all of a sudden you're playing as Isaac, because it would break what we're trying to do. For the show, we never had that restriction. So it felt very natural to like, okay, let's show more of their origin instead of through exploration and gameplay, through drama of this guy that turns on his squad.
I want to be mindful of your time. I know we're running out of time. I have just a couple more things I want to ask, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you see yourself these days? You have your hands in so many different things. You're the head of Naughty Dog. You're working on Intergalactic. You have the television show going, and certainly things that we don't know as well. You're a game maker first. I think you consider yourself a game maker first, and I'm sure you've had many opportunities to go and do other things. Are you wanting to keep this kind of hectic and frenetic schedule up, or are you wanting to kind of maybe segue back towards game making and create perhaps something new in Intergalactic and so on that maybe will allow you to jump back again? And I know there's a 3rd and potential 4th season of this coming that you have to deal with, but where are you right now kind of mentally with all of that and professionally? Getting torn in so many different directions.
That is a great question. At times, one of the things I love about my job is it's never boring. I'm constantly like spinning lots of plates, juggling, whatever the right idiom is. And I love that, because I go from making a new IP for PlayStation to working on a TV show to, a couple of years ago, we worked on Halloween Horror Nights for Universal Studios. So to work on like a theme park attraction sort of thing. And each one, I learned something new. I get to work with a bunch of really talented artists in their specified medium. So I get to learn a lot about this other medium. And I find that they all kind of feed into each other and make me a better artist in all things. However, at times I am spread a bit thin. and which is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I might not be able to go as deeply as I have gone in the past. Last of Us 1, I wrote every script myself. And there was a certain joy that came with that. But once I went kind of higher level and had more responsibilities, I just couldn't afford to do that anymore. So I had to rely on other people. And that has its own joy of, seeing what they bring to the table, how we kind of collaborate together. And, there was a period where I was directing the episode that aired last night, and I was gone for 2 months in Canada, a month for prep and then a month for shooting. And while I can jump on Zoom calls every once in a while, I really had to rely on other people to either run Naughty Dog or run Intergalactic and make certain creative choices. And then, they check in with me. But I love seeing people rise to the occasion, people that I work with. And however, having said all that, I do want to find a way to focus a bit more than I have maybe the last couple of years. And especially with Intergalactic now, that is my top priority over anything else. So whenever there's a choice between doing that or doing something else, it's either saying no to something else or saying, yes, that something else is cool. Here's who should be in charge of it, because it's not going to be me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds frenetic and crazy, and especially creativity requires a little bit of rest and inspiration, relaxation, and all those kinds of things. So I was definitely wondering that about where your head was at. And I wonder where your head is with, and my final thing I wanted to ask you was just about like The Last of Us. What do you want out of this overall IP moving forward? You're talking about a third season, which I assume would be, so let's have a fragment question here. The third season, if you had a fourth season, would that be Santa Barbara, or would that be something that is unwritten? Or is it going to stop, I guess, with the...
It would probably be some combination, like every one of our previous seasons. So
right.
Some combination of existing material and then supplemental new material. I think it's safe for me to say, because I think Craig has mentioned it, like, we're really intrigued with the idea of the prophet for the Seraphites and who was she? And
me too.
What else can we explore with her?
We never really meet her, right? Or even know what happened in the game with her. Like we get I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's certain theories and people talk about her in just slightly different ways. And obviously there's where she died and this idea of Martyr's Gate.
Right.
That's a lot of stuff that we're starting to talk about for next season. But the question of whether there would be a fourth season or not is whether we could finish telling the story in season 3 or not. And if we feel like, season 3 makes the most sense to end at some point before the end, that means there's going to be a season 4. But the kind of agreement that we've all had is that we're not going to go past game 2. That the story ends with this particular version of the story ends with the end of game 2.
Yeah, that's good. And you had mentioned that to me before, and I was happy to hear that, because I think that would have been more controversial. Yet, I think I speak for most Last of Us fans, although I don't want to speak for everyone, where it's like, man, we want more, and it's not even the TV show. It's like, there's so much to say. There's the whole 20 years between the events that started the game and when the game really begins. There's what happens after the boat, when the boats are going separate ways at the end of The Last of Us Part 2. Man, I really, really hope you guys go back and either do a prequel or do a sequel in the future. Because The Last of Us Online, obviously, we're not going to get now. And that was, I think, going to satiate us. So I really, really hope that you guys, for what it's worth.
And look, I meant what I said in the documentary, which I guess while I am the caretaker of this franchise, again, whatever the right title is that Sony has entrusted me with, it's important for me that everything is of high quality. I don't want to just make a lot of it. I just want to be very thoughtful about everything that we make. When we made like a theme park thing, we teamed up with Universal and teamed up with the best people to do that kind of like Halloween haunted house, whatever you call it. When we did the show, now we've teamed up, I feel like, with the best TV makers, with HBO, and we're making the best version of that. So if we were ever to come back to it, I want to make sure that it's a story worthy of The Last of Us. And I love that world. I love these characters. With the right opportunity, with the right idea, yeah, I would totally jump at it.
Well, I have one casting request. David Jaffe was supposed to be in Twisted Metal season 1, but he didn't want to do it because he was too lazy. So you got to cast him as a bloater in season 3, and we'll have him roaming around somewhere in Seattle.
David Jaffe as a bloater. Okay, I'll run it by Scott Brody. We'll see what he thinks.
Me. I'm sure he'd love that. Well, Neil, I appreciate your time. I mean, there's so much more to talk about, and hopefully we can do it in the future. But in the meantime, I appreciate you. congratulations on all your success. And
thanks, man. Likewise, by the way, again, we haven't talked since you've started doing Last Stand, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And appreciate your friendship and keeping me in the loop and all of that. And
I'm very excited at some point to talk to you more about Intergalactic.
Yeah, me too, man. Anything you want to say about Intergalactic? Like when will we hear more? We're excited about it. The controversy around that was part of what I wanted to talk to you about, but we'll leave that for another conversation.
It's also, I don't know if there's much I could add to that conversation, to be honest. It's just, there's stuff happening right now with media that you just have to, I feel like, ignore for the most part and just stick to your guns and do what you believe in. And I feel like that's how I would want artists to carry themselves. You know how this works. I can't tell you when we're going to announce or show something. I could just say I'm very, very excited for this game. Maybe as excited as I've been for any game. And it's very cool. It's the deepest gameplay we've ever done, and I can't wait to show it off. That's
exciting. Well, we'll wait with bated breath. Neil, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to me and to talk to the audience. And you're welcome back anytime. I know you're a busy man. I know you're behind a lot of barred gates with the different, PR and the different companies and the apparatuses or whatever, but you're always welcome. So anytime you want to talk, please let me know.
Appreciate you having me on, Colin. Thanks.
You're very welcome. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.